This week I wanted to talk about a thing called task paralysis. It's something that, let me move this over here like that. I'm sure you all know what it is, but for the sake of the training, I'm gonna go ahead and define task paralysis is, it's a condition in which, a person knows what needs to be done, and they may even have a really great desire to get it done, but they find themselves unable to begin or continue. And I personally don't believe that it's necessarily laziness, lack of intelligence, or lack of character. In fact, I think that task paralysis often will affect very capable people, leaders, business owners, military personnel, parents, ministry leaders, really anybody carrying significant responsibility. Sometimes it's caused by fear, sometimes it's caused by overwhelm or uncertainty. Um, Perfectionism can do it, discouragement, and really, like in my case, it's just having too many competing priorities. But whatever the cause, I think the result is the same. Important things go undone, and opportunities get missed, and progress can slow to a halt. So I'm putting this class together because I often get hit with task paralysis. And I also recognize that I probably do it to myself by having too many ideas or starting too many tasks. And then before you know it, I'm overwhelmed with stuff. And I just sit down and I can't figure out how to start anything. And nearly everyone that I've spoken to about it experiences some form of task paralysis, different seasons of their life. And I'm not saying he had task paralysis, but even in the Bible, Moses experienced the burden of carrying more than one man can possibly bear. What's the prophet Elijah? He became very overwhelmed and discouraged even after a great victory. And another paralysis, a national paralysis, the whole Israel nation stood frozen at the border of the promised land because fear got into their hearts and minds, you know. So I believe that the Bible definitely addresses the issue. Uh, and it not only helps me recognize the cause of paralysis, but it's also been helping me with some practical principles for overcoming it. And so the study over the next several weeks, one lesson at a time, I'd like to examine those principles and present and identify how task paralysis in our own lives comes to be and help develop some biblical strategies for moving forward, with confidence and discipline and really just faithful action. So the goal won't be just to understand why we get stuck, but to learn how to take the next faithful step and continue advancing toward whatever mission that God has put in front of you. And so for today, I just kind of want to introduce the subtopics of the training and then take a quick walk through some of the scriptures that I've discovered for each subtopic. And so when we get to the scripture list, it's not going to be comprehensive. And it's taken me a long time to come up with the list, mostly because I try to be very cautious about singling out scriptures to make them fit an agenda. I want to try to be very careful never to do that. And so we'll talk. The subtopics are fear, double-mindedness and indecision, overwhelm and excessive burden, anxiety and mental overload, procrastination and delay. I got a problem with that one too sometimes. Lack of vision and direction. I've had a problem with that. Perfectionism, waiting for the ideal conditions. I've definitely had a problem with that. Discouragement and loss of momentum. Yep, got that too. And then I want to focus on getting out of the paralysis, and by doing that, we'll figure out how to be diligent and show steady progress, and then leadership and execution. So as far as the scriptures go, I've got a few slides on each topic in the scriptures that I think really pertain to it that we can look forward to moving forward. And so in the first topic, fear-based paralysis, you know, Matthew 25:24-30 is the parable of the talents. Remember, that guy was afraid. He even said, I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent so that nothing would happen to it, right? Numbers chapters 13 and 14. Well, that's the story of the 12 spies and what God wanted them to do. But then, of course, the fear of the obstacles, those really big guys, threw them into national paralysis. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 26-32, Moshe recounts that issue. They refused to enter the promised land because they were scared. And of course, Joshua chapter 1, verses 6-9, be strong and of good courage, because God repeatedly addresses fear with Joshua and Israel, right? Some more fear-based paralysis. Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with thee. When fear immobilizes, God will respond with reassurance for you. 2 Timothy 1:7, God has not given us a spirit of fear, because let's face it, fear is contrary to effective action. And we get to double-mindedness and indecision. James chapter 1, verses 5-8, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And I wrote up there, you can see that it's a strong text for regard to hesitation and indecision. 1 Kings 18:21, how long will you suffer between two opinions? And Israel's inability to choose kind of resulted in spiritual stagnation there, right? Luke 9, verse 62, no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back. And that's about divided commitments and hindering progress. And of course, Revelation chapter 3, verses 15 and 16 is the Laodicean warning against being lukewarm, and where God tells them, I'm about to vomit you out of my mouth. So those are important for double-mindedness. And then overwhelm and excessive burden. Exodus chapter 18, 13-24. This is when Jethro, his father-in-law, counsels Moshe. Surely you will wear away, he says. Psalm 61:2, when my heart is overwhelmed, God talks about. 2 Corinthians 1:8, Paul describes being burdened beyond measure. Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens, which is a possible solution to overwhelm. And that's what we do here in the Watchman, right? We help each other bear each other's burdens. Anxiety and mental overload, Matthew chapter 6, 25-34. This is Yeshua's teaching on worry. And I'm probably going to emphasize verse 34, which is sufficient to the day is evil thereof. That means really focus on today's responsibilities. Philippians 4, 6-8 talks about replacing anxiety with prayer and disciplined thinking. Psalm 55:22, cast your burden upon the Lord. 1 Peter 5:7, and casting all your cares upon him, which is a restating really of Psalm 55:22. Procrastination and delay. We're working with Proverbs 6, 6-11, the sluggard and the ant. I'm sure we all remember that story. Ecclesiastes 11:4. This is a big one here, and I'm going to mention this one again in another topic, but he that observeth the wind shall not sow. It's big. Haggai 1, 2-8. This is where the people delayed rebuilding the temple. Luke 14, 16-24. Excuses prevent action. Boy, is that a big deal for me. And then we go lack of vision and direction. Proverbs 29:18. Where there is no vision, my people perish. Habakkuk 2, 2-3 tells us to write the vision down. Nehemiah 2, 17-18. Nehemiah establishes a clear mission objective and he mobilizes people to get it done. Luke 14, 28-30. Count the cost before building. So in my mind, that means planning eliminates confusion. And then this one here, perfectionism and waiting for the ideal time. I already mentioned it once, but it's a strong verse for the topic, right? He that observeth the wind shall not sow, and he that regardeth the clouds shall not reap. Proverbs 13:4, the soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing. That's and I'm sure we've all done this before, wanting results, but not wanting to put forth the action to get it done. James 2:17, faith, if it doesn't have works, is dead. Tells us action matters more than endless intention. Matthew 7:24-27, the wise builder acts on what he knows. And then, of course, discouragement and loss of momentum. I've had a loss of momentum in the past several years. First Kings chapter 19. This is Elijah after Mount Carmel. And I put a note here that it's a remarkable study in emotional exhaustion, and it truly is. And I encourage you to read that. Nehemiah 4:10, the strength of the bearers of burden is decayed. Psalm 42:5, why art thou downcast, O my soul? Galatians 6:9, let us not be weary in well doing. And then focus on getting out of the paralysis. There's 100 I can choose from, but I really wanted to be careful. Psalm 119:105, your word is a lamp unto my feet. And I put a note here that says, notice that the lamp will illuminate the next few steps, not necessarily the entire journey. Proverbs 3:5-6, trust and proceed. Joshua 3, the whole chapter. And this is where you'll recall when they're about to move to the promised land, the priests step into the water before the waters part and the waters move back so that they can cross in, right? So that's a faith thing right there. And then Hebrews 11, the whole chapter, that's more examples of faithful action when there's uncertainty. Diligence and steady progress, 20, Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance. Proverbs 12:24, the hand of the diligent shall bear rule. Colossians 3:23, this is big for me. I love it. Whatever you do, do it heartily. 1 Corinthians 15:58, always abounding in the work of the Lord. And 2 Thessalonians 3:10-13, this all talks about perseverance in work. And then as we move over to the leadership and execution lesson, when we get to it, we'll take a good hard look at Nehemiah chapters 2-6, which in my opinion is a really great Bible case study in project management and execution, because we'll teach and we'll go over assessing the situation, creating a plan, delegating the work, ignoring distractions, and completing your mission. And along with that, we'll take a look at Exodus chapter 15, which is also delegation to prevent paralysis. Titus 3:14, learn to maintain good works. And 1 Corinthians 14:40, let all things be done decently and in order. So that's really what I have for tonight. And I'm really looking forward to going through this in small chunks with you guys over the next several weeks. So now, if you guys got any questions, man, I'd love to discuss this just a little bit. Now you can come off mute. Anybody
Very
got anything?
detailed study. I thank you for putting that together. That's something that took a lot of time and effort to come up with that amount of research. Thank you.
I've been working on it for maybe since we first got back from Texas, Wayne, and it's been really tough. And I want to be very careful with the use of the scripture, because it's so easy for people to just pull something out of thin air and make it say whatever they want to say. And
Yeah,
so we
that's true.
appreciate it. So I'm looking forward to going through it with you guys over the next several weeks. It'll just be something like this 5 to 8 minute lesson on task paralysis. And I'll tell you, I talked to RD about it last week a little bit, and he even said, something that helps him is write it all down and figure out the thing that's going to be the easiest to accomplish. And I found that does work for me also. Sometimes I've got so much going on, I just shut down, and I need a win. I need to finish something just so I can get moving again. And I've started to do that again, and it's been really helpful. So appreciate that, RD.
Yeah, man. Something I thought was pretty cool was we were talking about the lamp. It doesn't lead the entire way. It just leads a few steps. I think that kind of, to me, I get that kind of illustrates the, it does take some work and some faith, like, you can't just think, oh, I have a lamp, so I'm all good to go. You're still going to struggle and you're still going to trip over things, but I don't know, just life takes work.
Oh,
It's hard.
like, you don't necessarily, like, the lamp doesn't light up in the whole path, so you don't know what you're going to be coming up on, but you don't want to be distracted by that
Right.
thing, doing what you have to at the moment.
And then sometimes that lamp can give you some, I know this kind of stretch, but just even like having that lamp can kind of give you sometimes like a false sense of hope, because you think, oh, I'm good, I can see everything, and then you start running and going faster than you should, and you end up tripping and falling, But so it's like, even though you got a lamp, still, take your time and move it at a good pace,
Let that be the lamp for your feet, just like God says, right?
Love it.
Yeah.
I love that part. That's good.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to presenting it and discussing every little bit of it with you guys.
Yeah. Like Wayne said, I really appreciate you putting the work into that. This is going to be good. Looking forward to it.